Hi, sorry I'm late.
That's okay.
But my computer decided it was time for a systems update.
It always seems to be how it goes.
So it had to go through the process.
Okay, this is also a good time to say that we are now live on Facebook.
All right, can we start then? All right, so I would like to call this meeting to order.
Great. I'd like to take roll. So Commissioner Keener,
Present.
Commissioner Allegado,
Present.
Commissioner Maynard,
I'm here.
Commissioner Kaufman,
Here.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Here.
Okay, we have quorum.
Great, thank you, Layla. Our first item on the agenda today is approval of the minutes from June 10th, 2020. Everyone should have gotten that in their inbox. Are there any corrections to the minutes to be made? Nope. Okay, so if there are no corrections to the minutes, then can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. And the minutes are approved. Next item is a report on the activities from the Office of Climate Change. Dirk, would you like to provide an update?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, commissioners. Josh Stambro with the City and County of Honolulu, Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency for the record. As you all probably know, we're seeing what happens when a country doesn't listen to science in terms of what's happening with COVID, and in fact was warned to prepare for something along these lines and didn't prepare enough. And our office has been caught up, as I think I've reported before, in terms of the COVID response. And in part, it's wrecking our economy because folks haven't changed their behavior as much as we need to meet the moment. And we recognize that climate change is going to do something similar in terms of wrecking the economy if we don't similarly listen to the science and prepare as the experts, and indeed this commission has advised the city and decision makers. The staff of our office, many of them have spent the last 3 months on COVID duty, whether in call centers or in the Emergency Operations Center. We are now using CARES funds from the federal government to hire contract workers for the call center, the COVID response center, and for some business education work around the different orders and protocols that have been put in place by the mayor. And so we will get back most of our staff. A couple will be detailed permanently to the efforts, or at least through the end of the year when the CARES funding continues. So if there's a little bit of a lack of capacity here, I hope you'll understand part of it is because we continue to have staff that are working on the COVID recovery, on testing efforts, and on the economic recovery initiative, and the new office that the mayor and managing director have been working on standing up at the Blaisdell, and that recovery hub should be up and online by the end of this month. Did want to report on a few things where we're making progress on the climate front, despite everything that's happening with COVID. The energy service performing contracts that we have been working on in conjunction with the Department of Design and Construction and the Department of Parks and Recreation have made real progress, and we've got 2 vendors that have tentatively been selected to do energy efficiency programs sort of citywide, and we're hoping also to get serious photovoltaic infrastructure and electric vehicle infrastructure installed at city facilities as part of that public-private agreement, both with the Parks Department and then citywide with the Department of Design and Construction. We've also are getting near to finishing the project around having a climate action plan. This has been about 1.5 years or a little bit more in process in terms of doing outreach to the community, working with technical experts at the University of Hawaii, working with advisory groups and others to put together a solid plan to meet the Paris Agreement and cut our carbon emissions on the island and meet the state goal of 2045 carbon neutrality. So a draft of that plan should be emerging in the next month or so. We are looking at some of the models and the technical information that has come back to the office from our partners at the University of Hawaii. Simultaneously, we are just beginning the process of developing the climate adaptation strategy. So climate action plan focused on reducing emissions, climate adaptation strategy focused on how do we make sure that we are avoiding the worst of what we know is coming in terms of physical impacts from climate, and working with communities to identify the most vulnerable areas and try to mitigate those. We are in the process of hiring a food security and sustainability program manager. This is something that's been in the works for a while and was actually advocated for by City Council. And I just wanted to let you all know that the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency annual budget did remain stable from last year. So we'll be able to continue our work. However, all departments have been put on notice that depending on what happens with real property tax collection receipts beginning in August, that we should prepare contingency plans for areas where we can trim up to 10% of budget. So again, I can bring you more up to date at your next meeting around budgetary issues and how that might affect the office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Stanbro. Are there any comments from the commission? Rosie?
Hi, yeah, thanks. Something that we've been noticing in our communities is the Aina Aloha Economic Futures efforts that have been going on. And I note that this week in particular, there are some live breakout sessions. And I'm wondering how some of the city's efforts with the new economic recovery response and maybe CCSR specifically are interacting with those efforts. Because I note that on Friday, there is actually a climate mitigation breakout session.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. We have been invited to attend that on Friday. Looking forward to seeing the the conversation that's happening there. The Aina Aloha effort, the Uplift Hawaii effort, the Women's Commission effort to talk about what a economic recovery can and should look like to sort of address longstanding ills and inequalities in the economic system here are definitely informing sort of the approach I think that both council is taking, and I know that they've invited those groups at some point to address the Special Select Committee on Economic Assistance and Revitalization, chaired by Councilmember Waters. And there's a stakeholder group that the council has appointed that we staff and work with them on a regular basis to try to bring some of the ideas around economic diversification to the table. And so we're definitely looking forward to having more input around sort of what are durable solutions that can make us less dependent on single sources in the economy. We've seen what a devastating effect that can have.
Thank you, Josh. I had a question about the climate adaptation strategy that you said was starting work. Is that going to be a similar trajectory as the climate action plan, or is there a different kind of framework for working that out?
Yeah, similar. We have actually engaged a contractor, ICF, which has actual local staff here on island, but they do national work around climate adaptation. And so we've had just the first preliminary meeting with them to sort of chart out the timeline. It's about a year-long process, probably a little bit more, given we obviously are in a tough spot in terms of doing community engagement and outreach and going and talking to folks in terms of what the limitations that COVID have on us, but we fully intend to interface with the community as much as possible, and given those restrictions, and that might push the timeline out a bit. But yes, similar timeline, hopefully a little shorter, and a contractor is in place and already at work.
Thank you. Were there any other questions from the commissioners? Chip?
Oh, thanks, Josh. Can you tell us about the mayor's new directive 20-14?
20-14, is that trees? Is that the one you're looking at?
Yes.
Sorry, I don't have them all memorized. So the trees directive is an order by the mayor to essentially put some protocols around making sure that we're valuing trees for the green infrastructure and the climate benefits they provide. Obviously, there are multiple different departments that interact with trees within the city. Some removing them for construction, some removing them for interference with infrastructure, some planting them, some permitting them with new developments, and there's lots of requirements. And so what the order tries to do is bring some clarity both to the process to make sure that if there is removals that are being done, that those removals are sort of elevated and understood what the impacts would be, and then what the financial implications are, the benefits of trees, not just in terms of a straight monetary number, but also sort of an ecosystem benefits number. So what it tries to do is just bring clarity to all the different departments that have a touch on tree work, to make sure that they have a process and a way to value those services provided by the trees in a regular manner, so that we can all be on the same page.
Does it lay out a timeline or any sort of schedule for the goal you guys have of increasing the canopy?
I don't think it gets to that level of specificity. We do have our office keeps track of the trees planted on island. We're doing pretty well in terms of the mayor's goal of having the 100,000 new trees planted by 2023, I believe it is, 2022. So a lot of those are clustered in, sort of rural areas, the plantings that are happening. I think with the tree order, Mayor Caldwell is interested in making sure that some of the places where our heat survey that the office performed last August, that they're looking at doing, that we look at doing shade trees in some of those areas to make sure that we're getting the most bang for the buck in terms of the climate benefits of trees. I think what you're seeing on the continent right now with the pretty brutal heat wave points out the fact that more shade and more cooling in urban areas is going to be critical in the years to come. So it does talk about that, but it doesn't give specifics about timeline or numbers of plantings.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Fletcher. Are there any other comments from other commissioners or questions? No. All right. And with that, if there are any comments from the public on this agenda item, I would ask that everybody, as Layla says in the group chat, please change your Zoom name to include your first and last name, your whole name for our meeting minutes and attendance for the meeting. I think most people have their names on there already, but and if you do have comments, we'll ask you to state your name at the beginning as well of your testimony. And then Wynn, I believe that the way we're doing comments on this is that you can put up your hand or go to the Facebook live stream, and then Wynn will monitor if you have a comment or a question during that time. And a thumbs up from Wynn. Okay, so I think that agenda item is done. Thank you, Josh. The next agenda item we have is correspondence, communications and correspondence from the public. One of the agenda items we had wanted to talk about in there was Mayor's Directive 2014, which was just discussed by Josh. Are there any other questions from the other commissioners regarding Mayor's Directive 2014? The other thing was that there was Wynn had said there was a new correspondence that had just come in today, and I hadn't gotten it yet in my email, so I might need somebody else to.
Oh, the correspondence was for Bill 2.
Oh, that's the Bill 2 item, right? Well, I still haven't gotten that one. So can you forward that to me, Layla? My East West Center email is being a bit sticky today. So we will discuss that in agenda item 7. And so moving on from correspondence and communications, we can go to the Bill 2 presentations, or agenda item 6. And so this is in relation to off-street parking and loading on Bill 2. We had some testimony at our last meeting about some additional information relevant to Bill 2 and our letter. And so we have asked for representatives from the Department of Planning and Permitting from City and County of Honolulu, Stanford Carr from Stanford Carr Development LLC, and a representative from the Blue Planet Foundation to give a brief presentation of up to 15 minutes, including question and answers for elucidating the commission on the details of Bill 2. So with that, we can go to our first presentation from, I believe it's Alex Beatty from the Department of Planning and Permitting.
Yep. Hi there, I'm here. Can everybody hear me?
Yep. Hi, Alex. Thanks for being
Great.
here.
Thanks for having us. Let's see if I can pull this off and share my screen. All right, how are we doing?
Looks good.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us, commissioners. This is a presentation that we had given to the City Council, but I'd like to add specifically that Bill 2 2020, which is related to off-street parking in our zoning code, also addresses several specific action items in the Oahu Resilience Strategy, specifically Goal 2 Action 8, which recommends reducing parking in order to provide more affordable housing. Action 24 related to increasing EV charging stations, and Action 25 creating carbon-free mobility networks. So I wanted to add that. I know this presentation doesn't talk too much about it, but Afraid I'd get that in there. So we're calling this presentation as right size parking. That's really what we're proposing. The zoning code has parking standards in it. New development has to comply with those parking requirements. And they're a little bit out of date. So we've been looking at it. This all came about as part of an overall LUO update program we're running. And it really identified parking as a barrier to redevelopment. And with the help of some funding from EPA and Smart Growth America, Smart Growth America produced several technical reports for us that included some local context, data assessment, a review of best practices around the nation, and they also helped us with community engagement. That outreach included group interviews with various stakeholder groups, a stakeholder workshop with about, I think 70 people or so showed up, many of the same folks from the group interviews. Additional one-on-one interviews and email interviews, and then we held a community meeting and made additional changes to the bill after that meeting. So as I alluded to earlier, why are we updating parking and loading now? Well, all of our plans tell us to, including the Oahu resilience strategy, which recommends reducing VMT and updating the parking standards. Through the outreach effort, we realized that our current vision and needs and the demographics of Oahu don't really align with our parking requirement. We've also been directed by the council to update various parts of the LUO, and the initial effort of that indicated that parking was a significant barrier to redevelopment. The effort further supports a number of other council initiatives, pretty regularly through 201H projects or IPDT projects or Vision Zero recommendations. The council is supporting us to look at our parking and loading standards. And we really think that this proposal will help redevelop certain areas and provide some economic recovery. So in our efforts, we found that removing parking minimums can allow for better context-based decisions, how much parking is required versus how much should be provided. We found shockingly that the most expensive areas to develop are often underutilized for how much parking is provided. I think it was Ala Moana area. It was about 70% occupancy rates during peak usage times. And as you can see at the bottom, it's $50,000 a space and only 70% are being used. We learned that car ownership rates are changing pretty rapidly, and particularly in the urban areas and along the South Shore. DTS is taking on a number of other initiatives to make on-street as opposed to off-street parking more available. There are a number of new transit services that weren't available when the LUO was written, such as car share. The rail is coming along, and people are using these alternative modes of transit. And we found that 2/3 of commercial properties were providing just at about what we require. And so that made us think that our requirement might be a little bit too high. And then again, parking is very expensive. It can add $50,000 to per space to a unit in town. So there are a number of goals. The first goal was really technical, and for us is to simplify these parking regulations. They're all spread across the LUO, which is some 300 pages long. And we wanted to put them all into a single article, Article 6. We wanted to then eliminate and simplify and revise the parking minimums so that we can streamline permitting, makes it easier for everybody else to understand, it makes calculations simpler. We wanted to group the uses into broader categories. So, an office chair or an office might require, 1 to 500. So for every 500 square feet of parking or of floor area, they might require 1 parking space. And if we group them into broader categories, it makes converting from, say, an office to a restaurant easier. The permitting requirements are similar enough that they can do it without too much hassle. We also found that there were, again, this is very technical, and for us, that there were just some uses that are listed in the LUO that didn't have a specific parking requirement, so we added those. And then we felt that, like some other counties in Hawaii do, to require the same standard for dwelling lodges and lodging and other similar use types, again, to make it easier to convert from one use to another. Another major goal was to reduce the parking requirement. This is a little tough to see, I know, but everywhere that's outlined in the black line and grayed out, there would be no minimum parking requirement if Bill 2 is adopted. So it's not that no parking would be provided, but none would be required. A context-based decision could be made by the developer. These areas are in the primary urban center or EVA development plan area. Does not include single-family residential neighborhoods unless it is within a half mile of a future rail station. These are areas that are, prime for alternative modes of transit and carbon neutral transit options, and we should allow for developers to make that decision. Next goal was to provide some more flexibility. We wanted to make joint use or shared parking easier, so we provided this simple chart. So on-site is just permitted. We wanted to create a wider circle for off-site parking. A quarter mile is an easy walking distance. Some places it's a half mile. We wanted to provide incentives for better multimodal access. So you can reduce the parking requirement if you provide car share, bike share, extra bike parking, or moped and motorcycle requirements. And then we've also seen, a bike parking requirement is several years old now. And we've seen that the language in the LUO is pretty limiting on what types of racks are allowed. So we wanted to expand that definition so that vertical and stacked and other types of bike parking can be provided. The fourth goal is to prioritize people and the environment over cars. That means larger tree wells, more trees in parking lots, more on-site stormwater retention, wrapping parking structures or setting back parking structures so that the pedestrian environment is more attractive for people to walk in to incentivize walking. And then requiring motor vehicle entrances from side streets whenever that's possible to decrease the number of curb cuts to make it safer to walk on the streets that are, have sidewalks or are designed for pedestrian activity. Here's a great example of a wrapped parking structure. Behind this is several stories of parking, but you would never know. The parking entrance is on the side street and not on the main pedestrian thoroughfare. Here's another example. This is a little older. This is in Waikiki. And again, you can see the parking is pulled away from the street and the building is up front. These are the types of things that we would like to require through Bill 2. The fifth goal is to update the loading requirements. This has been a sticking point for a lot of developers and architects. We require kind of a normal amount of loading compared to other places, but we require more of the larger spaces for like the large UPS trucks. And you can kind of see on the image on the right, that turning radius of 35 feet is really massive, and it demands an incredible amount of ground floor space be devoted to maneuverability of loading vehicles. So we wanted to, but require that, or allow for more of the spaces to be for the smaller loading vehicles. And we also wanted to exempt smaller lots. I think it's under 7,500 square feet from having to provide on-site loading. That'll free up smaller lots for redevelopment, and it should make larger lots easier to design with multimodalism in mind. And we did really think about the future with this bill, and a big part of that is unbundling the parking. So if there's no minimum required parking, that cost saving to be passed on to consumers means that the parking should be an option for a purchaser or a renter as well. So the way it's written in Bill 2, the parking would be owned and operated by a single entity who can make collective decisions about the parking, whether they want to redevelop it. We understand that there may be some issues with this, so we've been working closely with our builders and talking to them about other options for unbundling. Maybe the spaces can be sold, but there's still an option given to purchasers who are looking to buy. We are also proposing new spaces for passenger and ride hailing services and deliveries. I mean, I think in the last 3 months, food delivery has exploded on the island. And I'm sure that would become an issue if that trend continues and traffic increases back to normal levels. So having a place for a car to pull off and meet somebody and drop off food, or Uber and Lyft pickups, those sorts of things, makes traffic a lot easier when the car is getting off the road. We considered parking maximums, but it really isn't warranted island-wide at this moment, but we're looking at keeping it in as an option for discretionary permits. So TOD projects may have a parking maximum applied if they are proposing, so much parking that it creates traffic issues. We also were hoping to address electric vehicles, but Bill 25 really took care of this. What did stay in the LUO is options to convert existing parking spaces into electric spaces and allow them to, basically shrink just a little bit so that the equipment that's necessary can be put within the parking space, but still allow for a functional parking space. And then something else that needs to be thought about in the future, but really isn't on the docket for this bill, but it's just a concept that we want to pitch is, unused parking spaces are valuable areas that can be converted. And in the future, we should consider allowing conversion of unused parking areas into, habitable spaces, whether it's offices and retail, or maybe it's just storage for residents, or maybe it's new units altogether. This is a future amendment that we should consider and may help us get to some of these other goals. So just to summarize, we were hoping to simplify the LUO and provide some clarity, reducing minimums and getting rid of minimums where it makes sense. So again, does not mean that no parking will be provided. Instead, the market will determine what's necessary. It also does not establish any universal island-wide parking maximums. We wanted to establish new parking standards for design, so setbacks of parking lots and parking structures, or wrapping and buffering of parking lots and parking structures in order to prioritize people, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit riders over single occupancy vehicles. And then lastly, the unbundling component. It's key to improving affordability, as called out in Goal 2, Action 8. If folks if they're confronted with the cost of parking, they can make an informed decision about whether or not they want to pay for it. And we think that that will reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles on the island. And lastly, with all that's going on, there are some COVID considerations related to the bill. So again, eliminating the parking along with the unbundling will reduce construction costs and increase affordability for purchasers and renters. There's a lot of cost saving associated with parking reductions, and it gets passed on through the unbundling process. And then there's some design requirements that we recognize, like the wrapping or setting back, that may increase costs, but we think that they're important for the multimodal goals of the city. But we also recognize that we need to work closely with the development community to reduce the impact on their bottom line, but preserve the good design concepts that are being proposed. And thanks a lot for your time. That's all that I have.
Thank you, Alex. All right, we have about 2 minutes for questions for Alex from the commission. Anyone?
Can I say something? If nobody says anything, I do want to go on record saying that I applaud the city and DPP for their leadership in regards to updating those very old policies. Change and the discussion about it is never easy, but I very much appreciate this dialogue here. And thank you, Alex, for the presentation. That's all.
All right, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Bettina. I see we have a question in the chat from Matthew Geyer. Alex, do you have data on how much car ownership is changing on Oahu?
I can tell you that, what is it, about 45% of families on Oahu own one or fewer cars. And that was a really surprising statistic to me. I don't know off the top of my head what other data you might be looking for, but just anecdotally, the number of bikes sold this year has increased tremendously. The amount of Uber and Lyft usage has increased tremendously. And I'm sure that in our technical reports, which are attached to the bill, there's a more detailed and broader discussion about the other data points we use to inform the bill.
Do you have, do you know how that's changed. So I assume 45% is relatively low, but what is that compared to in a past data point?
I don't have that off the top of my head in front of me. I can look it up for you though.
Thanks. If there aren't any questions, we can go on to the next presentation. I don't see anyone popping up or anything in the chat. So why don't we go on to item 6B, which is a presentation from Stanford Carr, Stanford Carr Development LLC. Mr. Carr, thank you for being here today. And we can go
Thank you
ahead
for-
and share your screen if you need to.
Okay, Stacy will come in later and help me with the technical share screen. But I want to say thank you for having me participate. When I got a call from Win last week, I was curious as to why I got the call and won the lottery to participate in today's discussions. But having seen Alex's presentation with the featuring Kaleho Place, I have a little understanding why I was invited here. And I had a short discussion with Katia and Alex at the Honolulu Hale a few weeks ago during a public testimony of bill number 2, where we talked about the wrapping parking structures and setbacks and so forth. And I'd like to say that, you know, I really encourage the shift, the paradigm shift in parking. I mean, I've been doing this for over 30 years. And when DPP was known as Department of Land Utilization, DLU, and the parking requirements were that if you have 800 square feet or more for a 2-bedroom, you had to provide 2 parking stalls for every unit, which considerably added to the cost of housing. And, you know, whenever we looked at the feasibility of a development, it usually was the lot coverage and parking ratios that really dictated the amount of density that you'd be able to achieve in any project. I do want to clarify though that, and remind people that, you know, when we're making policy changes to the land use ordinance, that it impacts island-wide. It's not to a specific neighborhood or region on the island, so that we must be cognizant that housing costs are different in each of the neighborhoods throughout our island. And so it's not a one size fits all. I would, you know, I'm glad to see the changes in the minimum parking. I think it should go a step further, that let the developers understand their market to strategize their parking management plans and to understand the demographics of who they're selling to. You know, we do not want to overbuild parking. Parking in structured facilities costs $40,000 a stall and add significantly, and that is without the land costs. That is just a direct and indirect construction costs to construct a parking stall. So it's not in our interest to overpark a building. In fact, the real art is how can we minimize the amount of parking we have to build, but yet to create a community that's desirable where people want to buy. Because if you're unable to purchase the unit, or people aren't able to, are not willing to sacrifice for one stall, you're not going to sell the project. A week ago, there was an article of a project in Kaka'ako whereby the developer's gone in to amend his 201H to add another floor of parking because he's met that resistance with the consumers that they were not willing to sacrifice that extra stall. And so he didn't meet his pre-sale requirements and was unable to trigger his construction loan to build the project. And those are the unintended consequences that people will experience, and you'll have less housing being developed by over-regulating the parking issues. Let the developers take these risks. I want to show you a few of our real life projects that we've been involved with in order to exemplify some of what we're all talking about here. Just a moment here. Let's see if I pull this off. So Hale'Kuila Place is a 204 unit rental project we developed, broke ground in 2012. We have a total of 204 studios, 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. and a total of 284 parking stalls, 50 of which that are on the first two levels for the public. And this was a requirement by the HCDA. So there's actually 234 parking stalls for the 204 units, which translates into a 1.14 per unit ratio. You know, at first, when I saw the 40-foot setback requirements, that would have made this project undevelopable. And now I understand that that's been peeled back to a 25-foot setback. As you can see, that 25-foot setback would just barely allow this project to be built. You can see right here on the corner of the
Stanford,
Yeah?
I'm sorry. There's something might be wrong. We can't see your screen.
Yeah, please share your screen.
Steve, I need help. Can you see it now? Hello?
Perfect. Yes, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. So this is Holly Kawila. And again, what the impact was going to do to the project if you had continued that discussion on the 40-foot setback, this project would not have been able to be developed again. This project was entitled through 201H. So we did ask for parking relief, setback reliefs in order to construct what we built here. But as you can see where the blue outline there, that would violate the 25-foot setback, that it would be the fire exit staircase for the parking structure. The next project that you saw that Alex proposed or illustrated was Kehoe Place. And you know, every developer wants to develop aesthetically appealing, desirable projects. I mean, that's what's gonna, you know, be a big influence in people considering a purchase there. And here you do have an opportunity to line the parking structure so that you're looking at architecture, a more humanistic scale along the streetscapes. And then rising out of the middle of the block is a 400-foot high rise. However, I must stress that this is a very expensive system to build. We need to build a 3-hour wall separation. One is the parking structure, and then there's a 6-inch separation, and then we're building the townhouses with 8-inch CMU block. So this is very costly. And not every market or neighborhood would be able to afford this type of system. And so I caution the city trying to regulate these types of design concepts within the land use ordinance, because it's not one size that fits all. It's got to make economic sense, or it will not be feasible to be built. And we already have a very supply constrained housing market, and that's a result of decades and decades of regulatory policies that have been adopted and not realizing the unintended consequences. Here you can see that the 25-foot setback just barely makes this project conform to that proposed policy, and we encroach a little bit on it on the Malka side of the structure here. The third project that we built was Halekiwalo on the corner of Kona and Piikoi. And this was also entitled through a 201H. We have 128 units here, 27 one-bedroom units, 72 two-bedroom units, and 29 three-bedroom units. You note that we didn't build any studios because our emphasis on this project was for families because of the proximity across from Ala Moana Shopping Center and Ala Moana Beach Park. And the future rail line that will run through Kona Street and end at Ala Moana Station across the street. So here we developed 120 apartments. We have 78 parking stalls. So we're underparked. And we felt because we're underparked that we were going to have a policy of no reserve parking, that it would be a first come, first served parking structure. And there it caused a really big problem amongst the residents because the residents would get into arguments and confrontations with one another about the parking, and that we actually had to go back to a reserve parking policy. We installed SCADATA parking system, which has license plate recognition so that only those who are registered residents could actually access through the camera security gates, which would open up the security arms to allow them to park in the structure. That was the way we had to deal with this. But if you look at this 25-foot setback requirement, this building would not be developable under the policy that's being proposed, and which is why there are so many different unique circumstances with respect to the geometrics of different properties throughout our island, and more so in the urban core. You know, this particular project, we could build 2 levels of parking by way of accessing the first level off of Kona Street and accessing the second level off of a ramp off of Waimanu. Again, I would like to caution the city in relaxing and not over-regulate with respect to setbacks and minimum parking ratios. When it comes to bundling, you know, there was another slide I wanted to have in here, and if for any of you who've been to the peninsula at Hawaii Kai, we built a project called the Colony. It's a podium, 4 levels of residential, over 1 level of parking. I had a separate presentation that illustrated the street side, but the parking structure is only a 10-foot setback from what would be a public right-of-way or the roadway, because this is all condominiums. But there we bermed up the landscaping up to the parking structure, so it actually looks like the parking is below grade, but it's an illusion. We bermed up to it. And there's a 10-foot setback. So there's design techniques to mitigate that vertical massing that you folks are all trying to achieve with respect to the wrapping and the setbacks. When it comes to the unbundling of parking, and this is something I testified at the council hearing on bill number 2, that this would not meet the guidelines of Fannie Mae. And I've highlighted here that under the Fannie Mae guidelines for conforming 30-year mortgages, common elements in facilities such as recreational facilities and parking must be consistent with the nature of the project and competitive in the marketplace. Meaning we have to be as competitive as what exists in new market home sales as well as existing resales, whereby units are sold with parking stalls and is part of an appurtenance of a deed and is also security to the mortgage. Another portion that guideline that I like to highlight is that the developer may not retain any home ownership interest in any of the facilities related to the project. The amenities and facilities, including parking and recreational facilities, may not be subject to a lease between the unit owners or the HOA and any other party. Parking amenities provided under commercial leases or parking permit arrangements with parties unrelated to the developer are acceptable though. And you can find this under chapter B4-2 of project standards of the Fannie Mae guidelines.
Stanford, you have about 2 more minutes.
Okay, I'm I'm done now. I just gotta figure out how to get back to you guys.
At the bottom of your screen, there's a share screen button that should be lit up, and just you can press that and it'll say you can unshare your screen.
I'm not finding it.
There we go. Thank you. Are there questions from the commission for Mr. Carr?
I have a question. And I also was given guidance that even though I'm not taking action on this item, I am allowed to ask questions. So first, I really appreciate both your presentations, Stanford and Alex. Thank you. Stanford, my question is really interested in what you just presented in terms of not conforming to Fannie's guidelines. And I was wondering if you could expand on that a little bit and talk about, is there a version of the intent of unbundling that would conform sort of, in that?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, there was another project that has gone back in to amend their 201H to add a whole nother floor of parking, 56 stalls to be exact, because he met the resistance of the consumers in attracting willing buyers in the condo project because there was only one stall for a 2-bedroom unit. And that prevented him from satisfying his pre-sale requirements to trigger his construction financing. So, I think the unbundling of parking, I understand the intent to minimize the amount of parking stalls to achieve a deeper affordability and more abundance of affordability. But I think that's where you got to let the developers, because we are taking the risk. And I feel like by trying to propose a policy of in adopting it in the land use ordinance of unbundling parking, you're putting further risk upon developers. Really, you are. You're getting onto our side of the business, and it impacts the marketability. No matter what, if a home buyer is buying a condo with a parking that comes with it, he's getting a 30-year mortgage. If he now has to lease a stall, and he has a car, that's going to impact his qualifying on his income. And you actually, I feel, are going to add further costs because you're going to have someone administer this program, a third party. And so realistically, I don't think you're going to save money. Parking is an appurtenance. People can still sell parking stalls within a parking structure and a condo project. That has been permitted. So we already have that flexibility. People have the option to buy another stall. When we sold Kehoe Place, we had approximately 25, 30 excess parking stalls, and people were offered to purchase a second or third stall if they choose to do so. And many people did. There was a high demand for those stalls. Others who got a two stalls with their unit and only needed one, opted to rent the stall out to one of the other residences in the complex. So there already exists this commodity that's traded, leased, and so forth. But what you don't want is to impede the marketability and the saleability of a unit for the lack of parking, or for the lack of the security of knowing you have a reserved parking stall at a particular stall every day, day in and day out, 24/7.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Could I ask a question? First of all, thank you very much, Stanford, for giving this presentation. I'm somewhat familiar with the development, so it is wonderful to see you here and share your experiences. And I did have to chuckle when you started off saying that you won the lottery. So thank you for seeing it this way. I do have a question.
Sure.
Do you have data in that shows how the younger generations are moving away from being car-centric in a way? and whether that has any impact on entry-level home buyers yet. I am curious because I would expect it to start showing somewhere, and I wonder whether we're there yet or not.
We're getting there, and with the, when we opened Kehoe Place in 2017, we were one of the first to sign up with Servco on car hui. So we have a car share at Kehoe Place and also at Halekewalo at our rental project. And so we have multimodal options today with Biki, car share, hui, that we have reserved stalls for the hui right there on site. We have 6 stalls set aside for Servco at Kehoe Place and 1 stall set aside for hui at Halekewalo. You've got hail riding, Uber, Lyft as other options aside from the bus. Soon, in the next ensuing few years, we're going to have rail from Kapolei to Ala Moana. So as I am seeing that, the younger generations are less dependent on cars. They enjoy. We have residents at Kehoe Place that ride their Biki bikes to work every day, to Honolulu Hale or the Frank Fosse building, or to their other places of employment. And I think it all depends on where you live. It works great in the urban core of Kaka'ako. Alex brought up the fact of the unbundling of parking at 801 South. Well, it works there because of its adjacency to employment centers of City and County of Honolulu, Hawaiian Dredging, Kamehameha Schools, and the surrounding business community. So that there's an ability to share parking with the business community during the normal work hours of the week while people vacate their parking stall to go to work, to drive to work somewhere. It opens up a stall in the parking structure at 801 South, and the association can then rent it out to the surrounding business community to generate income to offset their operating expenses. That's a great thing, but that's a very atypical situation. I think every developer would love to have that opportunity and would welcome that opportunity to mitigate the operating expenses of the homeowners association by generating revenues on shared parking. However, that's not the case for every particular development and should not be adopted as a policy in the land use ordinance.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you so much, Stanford.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Stanford. We do have to move on for reasons of time to our last presenter, but I would like to note that in the group chat, there are a couple questions that are coming through, and I'd like to acknowledge those and note that Matthew Geyer said that there are plenty of cities that have less parking than Hawaii, and asked, are you suggesting that these cities aren't able to get mortgages from Fannie Mae? And made a comment about if unbundling is allowed, then by definition, the market for homes has changed and the rules have changed. And that Katie Rooney asked about unrestricted parking, how it was, she asked how it was paid for originally and if it was completely unrestricted. I would really appreciate if you could answer those in the group chat, Stanford, if you have time. That would be very helpful. And thank you very much for your presentation. And we're going to go on to our last presenter on this panel, who is a representative from the Blue Planet Foundation. And sorry, Wynn, I'm not sure exactly who it is. Oh, here we go.
Sorry, let me turn on my video. Hi, everyone. Hi, commissioners. Thanks for having me today to talk about Bill 2, an update to our off-street parking code. My name is, how do we flip through here? There we go. My name is Lauren Reichelt. I'm the Clean Transportation Director at Blue Planet Foundation and also the coordinator of the Sustainable Transportation Coalition of Hawaii. Blue Planet Foundation, for those of you who don't know us, is a local nonprofit organization that is working to clear the path for 100% clean energy on the island. And we do that through policy, creative communications, and strategic programs. In my role as the Clean Transportation Director at Blue Planet, I am tasked with the coordination and management of the Sustainable Transportation Coalition of Hawaii. or Stitch, if I reference it later, which is one of about 100 coalitions across the country that are designated by the US Department of Energy to support the reduction of imported petroleum use in the transportation sector. And as I'm sure you're all familiar at this point, the two primary mechanisms for reducing our climate impacts tied to transportation are first, to create system efficiencies or reduce the number of vehicle miles traveled that we collectively drive. And secondly, to replace the remaining miles with renewable technologies and fuels. So things like electric vehicles and biodiesel. It's the equivalent of reduce and replace. And Build 2 is an important part of that first strategy, which is reducing the amount that we drive, or our VMT. While the reduction of our transportation energy use and helping us meet our climate goals is, of course, a really important benefit of this bill, there are a myriad of other community benefits that come from this smart, well thought out policy, including the reduction of the cost of development and in turn, the cost of housing, and just generally prioritizing a people-oriented design. Some of this Alex talked about earlier, but it can make Honolulu more walkable and attractive, especially in its developed areas. We live in this beautiful place, but you honestly wouldn't know it if you're walking through some of the areas within the city. I won't dive too deep into the background on this bill because Alex did cover quite a bit of it, but Blue Planet Foundation was involved early on in January of 2019 with those stakeholder workshops, where we had about 75 stakeholders from a variety of sectors, city staff, the business community, advocacy groups, real estate and planning professionals, and transportation professionals. All come together and provide input on Hawaii's parking policies, as well as sharing what they'd like to see out of those policies in the future. And then Smart Growth America took all that information and all of that feedback that they received and paired that with models from other places across the country and best practices, and that eventually resulted in Bill 2, along with a lot of other community outreach. And they basically found that our off-street parking code was not in line with the city's goals, and which makes sense considering we're using, 30-plus-year-old code. Whoops. And that old code requires a ton of parking for any development, whether or not it's necessary. And those parking stalls cost considerable money. We had heard the number $50,000 thrown out earlier, but anywhere from $25,000 to $48,000 per stall. And then those costs are integrated into the cost of housing, or business costs. If you think about small businesses around the island, that's then built into their rent. And all this parking also takes up a lot of space that could otherwise be dedicated to other uses like housing or other community uses. And then lastly, of course, when you build parking, you're encouraging people to buy cars and you're encouraging people to drive, which heavily impacts our climate impacts. And actually 43% of Oahu households have 0 cars or 1 car. And so when you are building parking for every development and requiring people to pay for that parking, you have people then that have to pay for parking even though they don't have a car, or pay for parking even though they aren't willing to pay. They would not want to pay for that if they didn't have to. And of those households that have no cars, 69% of those households are low income. So when we think about the high cost of living, that is a persistent issue here. This is an opportunity to create flexibility in code that allows for relief for those residents that don't have the money to be paying for parking and don't have a car to need parking. And you might be thinking, we won't have enough parking on island, or maybe that we already don't have enough parking on island, but that's actually relatively inaccurate, although it may be perceived that way sometimes. We dedicate a lot of space to parking. This is the Ala Moana area with green representing parking. Here we have Kailua. And then here we have downtown. So as you can see, a lot of our land is already dedicated to parking instead of other uses. And you might be like, well, it's all full parking. That's also not true. These are photos from Ala Moana on Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year. Still plenty of stalls available. And that's a trend that we see across the country. So this oversupply of parking, we looked at it to see if it held true here in Honolulu, and it does. The urban master plan assessed and found it to be true. And then Katie Rooney from Ulupono Initiative went out and looked at 8 residential buildings at night when it would be high utilization. They were all buildings that had been built within the last 20 years and are locally occupied, and it was oversupplied by 30%. So there is parking that exists. And things like unbundling allow us to utilize that parking better, where someone in a building that maybe doesn't have as much parking could just be utilizing a spot in one of those buildings that has excess parking instead of just building more. So what would Build 2 actually do? I know Alex went through some of the technical details of it, but I want to talk a little bit about what the impacts are then of those code changes. So it would simplify regulations and right-size parking. And the no minimums, that doesn't mean there won't be parking. Developers, what that does is it creates flexibility for developers where they can build parking to the needs of the market instead of just, a flat out minimum requirement. So that's really great. They can tailor it to the site. They can tailor it to the demographic. It provides new opportunities. Meanwhile, the unbundling component is the part that creates flexibility for the consumer or the tenant. If someone, like I said before, doesn't own a car, then they don't have to buy a parking stall or rent a parking stall. And from a climate perspective, they aren't then encouraged, you buy a place and it automatically has a parking stall. You might be encouraged to buy a car just because it's accessible and it's available to you, even though you don't necessarily need one. Or it encourages people to drive more often. So it provides more choices. It just makes parking a choice instead of an obligation. On the other end of that spectrum, if you, for example, are buying a 4-bedroom condo that right now in this current situation, if you're buying a 4-bedroom condo that has like 1 parking stall attached to it, you might wish you had more parking stalls. It might be a deterrent to buy that place. But when you create unbundling, then you can go and you can seek out additional parking without limitations to that. And actually, with the example in Kaka'ako of people who didn't want to sacrifice, or that was the word that was used, but have 1 stall, and so they weren't buying into the property, that wouldn't be an issue with unbundling, because they could purchase as many stalls as they needed, or they could purchase them elsewhere in Kaka'ako. It actually creates more opportunities for the consumer to have as many or as few as they'd like. There may have been people who were paying for a parking stall that actually didn't want one, that then would have freed up additional parking for other condos within that building. Let's see. Yeah, so those are the 2 pieces. One offers flexibility for developers, while the other is offering flexibility for consumers. And then the people-centered design is really to keep unattractive parking structures off the street and line them with active use, encouraging multimodal transportation, encouraging people to walk around our communities, creating more walkable, livable communities, because we are consistently ranked one of the least walkable communities. And that's really unfortunate, and it shouldn't be the case. And so by shifting the way that we are building and the beautification of our properties, I think that can really enhance the walkability and livability of our communities. And so, yeah, all of these tweaks to parking code can help make Honolulu more livable for residents, make homes more affordable, reduce cost of living, more walkable community, more curb appeal. And importantly, it'll help us to develop in a way that reduces our climate impact. So setting the stage for more multimodal transportation, not making cars the default, not encouraging people who don't have a car to get one because they have this parking stall available, not making someone who doesn't want a car have to pay for a parking stall. And so we saw some of these pictures earlier, so I won't linger on this too long, but you know, just some examples of what that does look like and what that doesn't look like. You know, parking offset from the road, shared amongst a number of buildings versus a large lot just sitting next to the sidewalk. Yeah, won't linger on that too long. And lastly, I think it's really important to note that these aren't impossible feats. We see it existing already, just it tends to be the exception. And we want this to be the norm. We want to set the tone that we're prioritizing people, not just cars. We're moving people, not hunks of metal. So Bill 2 has come a long way from early last year, but it still has a long way to go. It was heard earlier this year by City Council, but then of course COVID hit and naturally it was delayed. But since Council has reconvened, it's been not put on the agenda for the Zoning, Planning and Housing Committee for the last 2 meetings. And we really don't want this bill to go to waste because it's been a long labor of love, I think, for DPP and a number of community organizations that have been providing input for a very long time. We really want the bill to be advanced. So I would encourage the council to support the hearing of this bill at the Zoning, Planning and Housing Committee in August. But I also hope that the version of the bill that is heard or that moves forward not only offers flexibility for the developers through the elimination of parking minimums, but also offers flexibility to the consumer through that unbundling piece. They're really complementary pieces and the unbundling is integral to the bill.
Lauren, you have 2 minutes.
Yep, I'm almost done. I just wanted to mention that other expensive cities have implemented unbundling, including Boulder, San Francisco, Santa Monica, San Diego, and Seattle, and they've been able to continue to develop while decreasing the cost of housing. In California, unbundling was shown to—
What is up with you and what is up with our passerbyers, Joel?
Everyone, please make sure you're muted.
In California, unbundling was shown to decrease the cost of rent by $200 and the cost of a condominium by $43,000. So I hope that, as I mentioned, the commission can support the hearing of this bill at the August council committee meeting, as well as these really important pieces and that can encourage a better balance between parking, affordability, transportation, and our climate goals. That's all I've got today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Are there questions from the commission for Lauren and Blue Planet? I also see that there are a couple comments in the chat from Brian Mick about his parking situation with a lot of empty spaces and a 12-story parking structure. And DCAB is interested in how unbundling impacts accessible parking spaces. Right now, the accessible space often ends up deeded to someone who doesn't have a disability, and a disabled resident end up with an unusable standard space. So these are all issues that we hope are taken up as well. So I do want to recognize that we are running a little short on time. So if there aren't any direct questions from the commissioners at this point, maybe I'll go to sharing my screen with the letter draft that we deferred from last week, or from last month, excuse me. When does that seem makes sense, and then we could make any changes and discuss if necessary, and then take action on submitting that letter.
Yes.
All right. Okay, can everyone see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a edited version of the letter that we talked about last month with some of the figures updated from our research assistant, Layla, so that that they were the most current that we could find. Given the testimony that we've heard today from the three presenters, are there areas that we want to edit in our support of Bill 2 with this letter?
Vicky, are you the one sharing the screen right now?
Yes, I am.
Can you please scroll down a little bit? If other commissioners are done reading, I'm ready to like continue to look. I just wanted to say I appreciated, I think it was from Andy's presentation, that he noted specifically which sections of the resilience, I don't know if it was the plan that Bill 2 addresses. I was just going to say that it would be nice to kind of directly sidewalk that and maybe reference those specific suggestions in our testimony.
Chip, Bettina, do you have any?
It was Alex, but yeah.
Oh.
Sorry, was that a question for me?
I was just wondering if you could remind us of the specific, you had brought up the,
Sure.
in the resilience plan, it was like decrease parking to increase affordable housing, EV.
Yep.
It aligns with the actions. I thought it would be nice to include those specific details. I like that.
Certainly. Whoever is writing it down, let me know when you're ready. There may have been other sections in there as well, but specifically goal 2 had a few. So action item 8 was to reduce parking for affordable housing. I'm paraphrasing.
Yep.
Okay. Action item 24 was related to increasing EV vehicle infrastructure.
Mhm.
And action item number 25 was to something like increase access to carbon-free mobility options.
Got it.
I feel like I am missing one, but
I can look through the resilience strategy.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks.
I think it was a more general one about VMT.
Okay.
It may have had its own action item. Well, sorry, I'm not quite sure.
That's 44. So.
Thanks, Layla.
All right, let me page down the main points that we had gone over in the letter and that we had edited. We're lowering housing costs. We had talked about all the parking space costs and updated those, taking it off of the, passing on those costs to the consumers. And we had put in our support for unbundling the parking. And I think a lot of the testimony we heard today helped kind of clarify that. Is there anything that we want to change in regard to how we have voiced our support here in this paragraph for unbundled parking? Here we've said that it can increase access to parking for those who need it and offer flexibility for building owners.
I'm not sure whether this is the right time to comment on this. but if I may, Vicky, I do want to say that I believe we all agree on the fact that Bill 2 needs a little bit of fine tuning. As it's currently written, and it is a work in progress, it does not work for everyone. And I think it is crucially important that it does not stand in the way of affordable housing. I believe, listening to everybody here today, that we all agree on some overarching points. And I feel that for the commission, we're a commission, we're not a council, we're a commission, and we are the Climate Change Commission. It is important that we support the direction that, and the intent that the direction of this, that this bill goes into, and the intent that it pursues at its core. I think it is dangerous to go into specifics because we're the Climate Change Commission. And as such, we do want to support the environmental component of this. And I think that is important. I also believe that this is a point that the development that the developers can wholeheartedly support. So with that said, I believe that as this is written, it is fine.
Thanks for your comments, Bettina. Yeah, I also agree that in the intent of the bill, and with our role as a commission, these are all points that are made in the letter that support what we are here to do, which is reducing greenhouse gas emissions, promoting climate change mitigation and adaptation, and all of these things that we address in the letter do talk about that. Also recognizing that we are voicing our support for the intent of the bill in this. Are there other comments from the commission? I also feel like it addresses these areas and takes into account comments from the presenters that we heard today.
Hey, Vicky, this is Stanford Carr.
Hi, Stanford. Let me see if I can bring
I'm not a commissioner, but I like to chime in. I appreciate what Commissioner Bettina's comments stated, and I just would like the commission in crafting this letter to be cognizant of, I understand and appreciate the intent. We all are concerned about climate change and our behavioral habits and practices. However, when you're writing a letter as testimony in support of Bill 2, and Bill 2's got some great attributes in there, but we don't need any more over-regulation in housing, which is why we have a housing shortage today, is decades and decades of over-regulation that resulted in all the unintended consequences, why we don't have sufficient supply of housing. When you're making the comments to Bill 2 in this letter, you've got to look at it from the standpoint and be conscientious of different parts of the islands. You know, this does not pertain to someone who lives in Waianae or the North Shore or Wahiawa. And that's where my concern is that in Bill 2, you're proposing to adopt policies that will make it infeasible to develop in other areas or neighborhoods on the islands, just because you can't afford it. I saw one comment from one of the gentlemen out there that had a question, why can't we make a 40-foot setback on a building work for a parking structure? Well, take 40 feet along the length of your property line, and when you're spending anywhere from 200 to, some people have spent as much as $800 a foot for urban lands for development, that translates into millions of dollars, and that is accountable to the cost of development. It's got to make economic sense, or it's not financeable and it's not buildable. It's just common sense. Sorry.
Thank you for your comments. Chip, do you have any comments? We haven't heard from you yet. Or Rosie, did you, if besides the inclusion of some of the items that Alex had given for the overall intent?
I'm supportive of the rest of the letter. Yeah, I just think it would be good to, you know, provide more support on why the Climate Commission is weighing in on this, and I think the you know, aligning it to that strengthens why we are putting testimony in for this.
Right. I did also want to acknowledge 2 pieces of correspondence from the public at this point. One is from the panel of or for Trees for Honolulu's Future, TFHF. TFHF is concerned that the proposed revisions to LUO do not set trees and surface parking lots up for success. And have noted they provided specific language to DPP to address trees. And there was also another letter from Ulupono. Let's see if I can find it here. The Ulupono Initiative strongly supporting Bill 2. Can everyone see that as well?
Yeah.
Okay. And I haven't had a chance to read that because we just got it right now, but they are strongly supporting of the bill. And note that these regulations do not affect current on-street or off-street parking, which is a good point as well. And so all of these correspondences will be posted, I assume, on our page. And from when? So going back to the letter, unless there are any other comments, I've heard from Bettina, Rosie, and myself that we're happy with the overall intent of the letter, and we will make those additional changes as pointed out in the edits to the text that I made up here about justifying why the Climate Change Commission is weighing in on this. And McKenna is not involved in this as she is recused from this action item. So unless there are any other comments from the commission. Bettina?
I do have one other comment. I think it is important to note that we are voting on something that is still somewhat fluid. Right. I believe that the conversations and the discussions of the development industry or sector with DPP and those of us on the design and engineering side is crucial. And I feel that the success of Bill 2 and the workability depends on the outcome of those discussions. Mm-hmm. So I would not want our letter to be misconstrued as something that states, okay, the way this is, where we are right now, the way it is written right now, we are in favor of. I want to repeat the importance of the Climate Change Commission supporting the intent of this bill, but recognizing the importance of the continued dialogue of the various affected parties to avoid any unintended consequences, as Stanford put it.
Tina, is there a text change that if we put that in the last paragraph?
I think that would be fine.
Okay, so making those changes. So
because our commission has no regulatory power, but it is important that we are clear with what we are supporting.
something like that.
Yeah, and we can fine tune that.
Yeah, and we'll fine tune that. So I'm going to propose that given these changes, can I get a motion to approve the testimony on Bill 2 as amended to be submitted to the City Council whenever is appropriate and when we make these changes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. What happens next?
Recognizing that McKenna is recused from this vote, this motion is approved with 4 ayes and 0, 4 ayes.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much again to our 3 presenters who gave a lot of insight into the details and really brought up a lot of good points with Bill 2 and still a lot of the questions that need to be addressed in the fine tuning of it. Before we go on to action item 7, are there any more comments from the public? All right. I'm not seeing anything on the screen. And so with that, why don't we go on to action item 8, which is in relation to the status of several of our guidance documents from the commission. The first one is an action item on our financial risk guidance, which has been distributed to everybody and should be in the final stages and is ready to be approved unless there are changes to be made today. And I can bring that up and share with everybody as well. So this version incorporates all of the edits that we talked about at our last meeting where we discussed the financial risk paper. It has, these are the set of 5 main recommendations and it's been streamlined. McKenna and a research assistant, Layla, have gone through it with me. McKenna, is there anything that you'd like to present on this version of the financial risk paper before we ask the commissioners if they have any more edits?
Mainly this version is sort of seeing through the comments from, I think, was our January meeting, right? So we didn't really add content so much as smoothed content, addressed some of the edits, addressed a couple recommendations for kind of better explaining some of the different insurance mechanisms and types. So one thing that Layla did a really nice job adding was a glossary of terms in the back because some of this material is rather dense and sort of making it a little bit more user-friendly. So it's those kinds of things. I wouldn't say there's a lot of substantive changes in terms of content from the last discussion.
Right, and I can go to the glossary, which is the newest content. But it's a very exciting glossary of financial terms for the most part. So for the other commissioners, are there any comments after reviewing the draft that you had wanted to make before we address this as an action item of being adopted?
I have some comments. So are we doing editing at this point?
If they are if you have substantive edits, then this wouldn't be an action item for this week and we'd have to delay it again. But if they're non-substantive edits, things like grammar or arranging things, then we could do that and still act.
Oh, you can still edit the document, Victoria.
Oh, okay. Or we can still edit it. But
Are we going to be voting on the document today and that will lock it in, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I have a couple of comments then. So,
all right, go ahead.
In the second paragraph at the very start, it says like the wildfires in California and Australia. I think that will date the document a few years from now. So suggest changing it to just such as wildfires. I mean, something more generic that doesn't date it. Under recommendations, the opening paragraph on line 2, I think we need
Wait a second.
Sorry.
I need to put on my track changes.
Vicky, maybe just highlight it and note that as a comment that it seems updated. Oh, yeah. Okay. That's good too.
Okay, what was your next comment, Chip?
Such as wildfires and hurricanes, for instance.
Okay.
And then go down under recommendations, line 2. I think we need a "the" in front of cities.
Okay.
Under recommendation 1, the bottom line across needs an S, and above that, recommendation needs another M.
Oh, maybe we should just run a spell check. We can do a spell check on the entire document before adopting.
Well, that can also be done post-adopting. Things like edits are.
Okay.
Yeah. Vicky, I'm sorry. I do have a hard stop in like 1 minute, but I don't think you need me to finish this item. So, but if I fall out, that's why, but you still have quorum.
Okay. Are there other comments, Chip, that are things that we can't address in the final editing of grammar and
I'm trying to decide what is a must-have and what is not. So I thought we had mentioned compound events in the past, and it doesn't seem to appear anymore in the document. A compound event would be a heat wave following a hurricane, or we've seen wildfire on top of a hurricane on Maui.
Chip, it's at the bottom of page 2.
Bottom of page 2.
It is short, but it's still there. That original language we wrote.
the cumulative and cascading impacts.
All right, I guess that's sufficient. I'd like to see that stronger. but that's sufficient. The other thing is distant events. You know, the failure of bread baskets across the world is going to have dramatic impacts on us. And not every event affecting our economy needs to be locally based. So I just worry about that. But I also don't want to hold up the vote on this. This has been a long time evolving, this white paper, and it's a very good white paper. It's a very good shape. And maybe what I'm suggesting are just little fiddling around the edges that we can save for another white paper at another time.
I think what you just said merits maybe adding a sentence under that component, right? Anyways, I think that's a good idea. And with that, I must go.
Okay, thanks, McKenna.
Children who will be standing there stranded if I don't. Bye, everybody.
Bye, McKenna.
Bye, McKenna.
Chip, are you suggesting that we put it in table 1 or just make a note of it in this item 2 under climate change shocks and stressors?
Item 2 would be sufficient.
Okay, and can you give me a little bit of wording on that again? We can shape this later.
All right, let me just read out loud, starting with the first sentence. The impacts of climate change can be broadly categorized into those that happen suddenly, a shock, or those that happen gradually, a stressor, semicolon. Impacts can also take the form of compound events, and distant events that have significance in Hawaii.
Spatially distant or spatially and temporally distant?
I would just say distant. You could see geographically distant, maybe.
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, that's good. At least it's in there.
Do you have any more substantive edits before we take this up for action?
I'm looking.
Excuse me, this is Dave. Before action, are you taking comments from the public?
Yep, we will take action for, or
Okay.
sorry, take comments from the public before we vote.
Okay.
Page 5, third line up from the bottom. Maybe Layla could help. It says, the third line up from the bottom begins, pay off the claims made by the insurer. Should that be the insured?
Okay.
Let's see. Let me just read the whole sentence. A specific predetermined trigger takes place and meets a defining criteria, the investors lose the principal that they initially invested as those funds pay the insurer. Made by the insured. Yeah.
ED?
Uh-huh.
That's it. I have some editorial
Yeah, please send
non-substantive.
the non-substantive editorial things to us and we'll make sure they're incorporated as well.
Right. Yep.
All right, are there any more comments from commissioners on the paper before we go to public comments?
None from me.
Thanks, Rosie.
Nope, none for me either. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Bettina. And with that, I will open
wait.
to.
Sorry, Vicky. I had one more thing. We had talked about adding acknowledgements maybe to the interns who had.
Oh, right.
And
is
I
that
just
not in this one?
No, I can't remember. I just wanted to make sure if we were going to add an acknowledgement section.
It's there.
Okay, great. I just wanted to check on that.
There we go. Yep, there's the acknowledgement section. It includes everybody who's reviewed this and edited and did research for it. So there were a lot of people involved. Thank you to everybody. All right, thanks Rosie for bringing that up again. So let me pull up my chat screen. There's a lot of stuff on my screen right now. Sorry if I'm a little bit slow here. So now I will open up this agenda item to comments for the public before we take it on a vote.
I had a comment, Chair.
Go ahead. Sorry, I can't see you.
This is Dave. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Dave Arakawa.
Right.
I just had a quick comment. You know, I love Chip, but Chip recommended deleting the reference from the wildfires in California so we don't date this so you folks don't date this document. But I thought science and technology is always changing and that context is very important, and that I'm not sure about this document, whether it's meant to be a Bible to be used all the time or is it meant to be updated. So it was just interesting that, you know, context would be, we feel that context would be important in this situation, what the world was going through at this particular time. And anyway, so that's just a comment, because 10 years from now, it might be different, right? You know, so you folks worked really, really hard on this. And I would think that a little context in there wouldn't hurt the outcome of it. I don't think this was meant to be the Bible, really. So thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Dave. I think the two ways we could address that are either leaving it as it is and saying such as wildfires and hurricanes that were experienced in the 2018 through 20 or whatever we're looking at in California, Australia, or doing it something more general like this. But thank you for your comments. Let me pull up the chat. Are there any more comments on this paper?
This is Rosie. I see Mr. Arakawa's point. In fact, when I said you could just put it as a comment, that was similar to what I was thinking, was that some of those events were so striking. I think they really resonated with a lot of people. So making reference to them, but I think, yeah, maybe adding in the year could really context. So, I mean, either way, it doesn't matter to me, but I can see where he's coming from.
All right. I don't see anything else in the chat. So can I get a motion to vote on accepting the climate change and financial risk recommendations paper?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
And all in favor of approving the financial risk paper with the editorial corrections and spell checks?
Aye.
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 So that is 4 ayes, and Commissioner Kaufman had to leave, but quorum is still met. And so the paper has been passed. That was a long time coming. Thank you. Next on our agenda, we wanted to get a couple updates from the other guidance documents that are being worked on by the commission. So the social cost of carbon paper was the first one, but I believe that McKenna would have been the one that is giving that status update.
Bettina can also give an, I'm sorry, Commissioner Maynard can also give an update.
Bettina, can you give an, I mean, a very brief update is all we need, just on the status. And
It would be very brief because I have to be in another meeting in 4 minutes. we are chugging along, and we have a structure of the paper outlined. We are in the process of attaching numbers, dollar numbers, and we're looking at examples that illustrate our points. That is about as cryptic and as exciting as I can make this update. So stay tuned for more a month from now. And
Okay,
I think, yeah, go ahead.
I have been asked to bring up kind of a timeline in terms of integrating the carbon paper with the climate action plan of the city. And so I think that ideally they would want this document to inform the climate action plan. So they would hopefully be able to get input from the drafted document by August or September.
I think that is not unrealistic. I think we can meet that.
Great. Wynn has also reminded me to say that the financial risk paper as approved will be sent to the mayor and city council as part of the adoption. Bettina, before you go, is there anything that you wanted to say about the construction paper as well, the status update?
Oh, I'm very excited about the construction paper, and it is a little further along than our carbon paper. I'd like to present a draft at our next meeting for discussion. We should have this in fairly good shape by then. If anybody would like to help on this paper, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to look at Commissioner Fletcher and
help.
Awesome. So we will have a draft for everybody's review at the next meeting.
Fantastic, thank you. The final update we had was on the equity paper. And that is the one that Rosie and I are working on. As part of that paper, which we've had drafted for a while, part of the last thing we're waiting for is from updates from CCSR from Lala Nuss in hearing from the findings that she's been doing with community meetings across the island, so we can integrate those into the equity paper. And then also get, it would be nice to get a report from Lala on those results more formally at a commission meeting. So Lala, was there anything that you wanted to report on in terms of initial results from the work that you've been doing?
Aloha, thank you. I'll be brief, although we could go into extensive conversation. Yes, the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency has adopted its outreach, prioritizing frontline community organizations to virtual community kuka. And so the past 2 months, we've been conducting 1-hour interviews with individuals as well as groups, focusing on their experiences during this crisis. And part of our methodology or framework that's been guiding us are really focused around listening sessions with structured methodology of questions centered around community-based knowledge and experiential storytelling. And this is building off of the resilient strategy development process with frontline communities and leaders focused on those that are servicing socioeconomically disadvantaged and underserved communities. We are in the current phase of coding and analyzing a lot of the quantitative data, as well as having complementary qualitative demographic data to support the results. Overall, we've been able to have these kuka sessions with 32 frontline organizations and 70 individuals. And they're representing sectors around food security, community health centers, natural resource management, place-based education, housing affordability, and home ownership, youth advocacy groups, healthcare, human services, arts and culture, nonprofit, small businesses, and community-based development organizations. Some of the emerging themes that we're coming up with that are being revealed really have to do with the definition of community resiliency being grounded in relationships, as well as first responders being the communities themselves. Another part of that is the engagement aspect, communities really needing to genuinely be represented and included, and a lack of access and understanding to some of the decision-making and jurisdictional frameworks through institutions. Access is a big concern right now. Wi-Fi, especially for our disenfranchised frontline communities. Needing language resources and translations on a lot of the orders or information coming down from government for communities that English isn't their first language. And really, I think with the oneoahu.org website, that's been a great resource for community to get the updated information. But in generally speaking, our websites are a little bit difficult to navigate conventionally. Critical relief, slow and inequitable access to unemployment, shifting in foundation funding priorities, and a huge concern about rental mortgage utilities relief funds that are short-term. And as many have probably experienced, food has been central as far as short-term relief, shifting in demand, long-term self-sufficiency, food waste, and limited access are some of the things that have been coming up. We should be finishing up our analysis over the next week and formulating a report. Next step is going to be reaching back out and gathering the community members that participated in this to report back, and then be able to report back to our leadership, as well as look at what the potentials are to integrate this into other tools, mechanisms, and papers, resources that will be used, really centering equity in our work moving forward, specifically, hopefully informing the climate equity paper that the commission is producing. Mahalo.
Thank you so much for that update, Lala. That sounds like very relevant qualitative and quantitative data that will really finish and fill out the equity paper as it stands and give it a very local perspective that it hasn't been able to have until this point. So thank you for your work. Are there other comments from the two commissioners that are left? Nope. All right, so thank you again, Lala, and we will be in touch and we'll be interested in arranging a time for you to present to the commission on the findings of your analysis. With that, are there any comments from the public on this agenda item of the updates on the three papers? Sorry, the three guidance documents. I'm not seeing anything and nothing in the chat. So with that, we will move on to number 9, which is public input for matters not on the agenda. If you have comments, feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself on here. And I'll scroll around, see if I see anybody. I'm not seeing anyone. All right, so item 10 is our tentative next meeting date. This brings up something I'll just get, we can discuss this with the rest of the commissioners as well, but we had, the office had brought up, CCSR had brought up the idea of setting a more regular meeting date on a monthly scale. So if it was held on a specific day, third Wednesday of the month or whatever at a specific time, it would be easier for us to both plan out our future topics, presenters, and get people to attend at a more reasonable time that was consistent, but acknowledging that it's hard to get us all in the same place at the same time. Chip or Rosie, do you have any thoughts on establishing a more regular meeting time?
I think we're all super incredibly busy. I have low confidence that we can do that, but I mean, we can attempt to do that. I'm happy to share my calendar and, see if, somebody can see if magic things can align, but I don't have super high confidence.
Although it's really nice to have us here, all of us here for each meeting, we only have to have quorum to vote on things as well. So as long as we have quorum, we can move forward with meetings, even if one or two of us can't make it for each one or two meetings.
I like the idea. I have a couple of other standing meetings that work. In fact, I have one standing meeting with 18 other people who are all extremely busy, and it works once a month. So once you get out far enough, a month or two becomes a lot easier. And since 3 of us are instructors at the university, we have to worry about our class schedules and not interfering with those. And I know McKenna, I think she teaches on a Thursday evening fairly late. And I teach Tuesday and Thursday morning at 9 a.m. Otherwise, I'm open as far as teaching.
Okay. Yeah, these are things that we can sort out in the in a calendar poll, a doodle type, but it seems worth pursuing to see if we can figure out a regular time to have a standing meeting.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then Wynn and Layla, why don't we start working, by which I mean you guys start working on trying to figure out our schedules, and we'll try and figure it out.
Sounds good.
Okay. Number 11, are there any announcements?
I'm giving a webinar to the Kauai Board of Realtors August 11th from 9:30 to 11 a.m. on climate change writ large. I have 90 minutes. I'm going to spend about 50 minutes with PowerPoint slides and then Q&A. So I think that's open. I know it's open.
Right. If you're welcome to share that on with the rest of the CCSR to send out to the group if you'd like to give us all the link. I also wanted to bring up in terms of announcements, kind of, we already talked about maybe if we're having standing meetings, would be able to better lay out a timeline for things to accomplish over the next year. But were there any other topics that you guys wanted to cover in the next, I talk about the next year since I'm chairing this for the next year. So that's the time scale that I'm thinking of. But are there any major accomplishments that we want to focus on besides responding to requests from the mayor, the city council, or the office for support, finishing the equity paper, the construction paper, and the social cost of carbon paper, which is already a lot. One thing that I was thinking of was looking at some sort of guidance for climate adaptation and COVID-related economic recovery, and how we could produce a set of guidelines that take all of that into account. That might be something helpful going forward.
Oh, sorry. I know we're past that issue, but I believe McKenna is presenting with Sea Grant Director Darren Lerner on that very same issue of COVID and climate change. I believe it's a UH campus conversation. I don't know the link off the top of my head, but yeah, so that is coming up that we could then see if it dovetailed onto something additional that we might want to take up.
Yeah, that's a great idea. We can ask McKenna to distribute that information, and taking that kind of lens and applying it to kind of the city framework, I think would be something that might be worthwhile.
Just something I've been opening myself up to learning more about is sustainable tourism.
Mm-hmm.
As we try not to come back with the same one-trick pony that our economy is. Are there different versions of this?
That's been a discussion at the regional kind of Pacific Island scale too. So definitely some bigger conversations that that might be a good topic as well. Are there any other topic suggestions or comments from the public?
Hi, Chair. This is Dave Arkawa. Sorry, I don't know how to get my camera back on. But anyway,
All right.
I'm a member of the Hawaii Tourism Authority, and we have a sustainable tourism plan. We just came out with one. So when the time is right, Chip, we can have somebody from HTA come present or work with you folks if you folks ever decide to do a paper on that. And we're in the process of selecting a new CEO. So I don't know if you, probably it might be better to do it after the new CEO comes in, but Chip, I'll work with you on that, and we talk story, and you folks can decide whether you want to, when and if you want a presentation by somebody from HTA. Okay?
Great, Dave. Thanks very much.
Take care. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. If there are not any more announcements, then I believe we are at adjournment. Thank you, everybody, for sticking in here on this long meeting as I get my legs as chair. And hopefully everything will go faster and more smoothly in the future. What kind of, sorry, Wynn or Layla, what do I have to say to adjourn the meeting?
Ask for a motion. I move to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor? All right, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good job, Vicky.
Bye.
Bye.